Hi, and welcome to Why Do Countries Exist, an episode on Chilean political parties. So today's episode was requested by someone a while ago, not 100% sure where, sorry about the delay, but if you want me to do another country's political parties, promise I will get to it eventually, you can comment it down below, send me an email, message me on Patreon for my patrons, thanks to them by the way, or put a request in the feedback and request form in the description. I currently have requests to do Slovenian parties, Kazakh parties, Indonesian parties, Argentine parties, Iranian parties, Mexican parties, Armenian parties, Iraqi parties, Singaporean parties, Swedish parties, and many more. So for some context for Chile, I have a couple different videos I'd encourage you to watch if you want. Firstly, you can watch my episode on the history of Chile. A little self-promotion never killed anyone. I just go through the basic political history of the country, so if you want an overview of Chilean history that is good, there is that. There also is the YouTube channel Chile Talks. It consists of two expats living in Chile talking about Chilean politics and the news of the day. They started in July of 2020, and the latest episode was this past May. They actually have an episode talking about Chilean political parties, although it was back in 2021 before the most recent election. It's an interesting perspective of politics in Chile, and just have an interesting look back at what people were thinking during the constitutional conventions and the latest election. I also will recommend the channel The History of Latin American Parties. His channel is a look at the political development of a bunch of different parties across Latin America, including the Radical Party, the Communist Party, and the Socialist Party of Chile. He hasn't posted in a while, so his series as of recording ends in the 50s, but does help show the early developments of several important Chilean political parties that we are going to talk about later this episode. Even though I just told you where to find context, I'm still going to take some time and discuss the current mess of the Chilean party system. So in 2019, Chile had massive protests over the current status quo. Elections in 2021 saw the old traditional political coalitions of the center-right and left weakened, while the new more radical/principled alternatives grew. This has resulted in a legislature that is gridlocked. This might not be the worst thing in the world, considering Chile was going to get a new constitution, so hopefully the system would properly reform and function. However, the Constitutional Convention elected in 2021 was dominated by left-wing forces and was rejected by Chilean voters in 2022. A second Constitutional Convention was elected in 2023, this time dominated by right-wing forces, which was rejected later that year. So constitutional reform has faltered, meaning Chile is stuck with a constitution many have made rejecting a core part of their political identity. And, annoyingly for me, the Chilean state decided to dissolve parties that failed to get over 5% of the vote, or failed to get a decent number of elected politicians into office, so several small parties are in an unclear state of maybe being around or maybe being dissolved. This has all made politics very dysfunctional, parties and coalitions confusing to map out, and Chile struggling to move forward. I'm guessing a decent amount of information on the political structure, and maybe even parties of Chile themselves, will be inaccurate by the time next elections come around, so keep all that in mind. Chile's legislature is made up of two bodies. First, there is the lower house, the Chamber of Deputies. The chamber is made up of 115 deputies who are elected via proportional representation from 28 different districts. These districts range from sending 3 deputies to sending 8 deputies. The chamber votes on rules and regulations, constitutional amendments, international treaties, approves a state of national emergency, and can question government ministers. The upper body is the Senate, made up of 50 senators. Senators are divided into 2 tiers, with them being elected at different times, with senators serving 8-year terms, while deputies and the president serve a 4-year term. Senators are elected from the 16 different regions via proportional representation, with districts sending between 5 and 2 senators, depending on the population of the district. The Senate has the same responsibilities as the Chamber of Deputies, however, I'm guessing since it's a smaller body, it's likely more prestigious. That being said, the legislature currently is weak compared to the President of Chile, who has a lot of decision-making power in the country. Finally, before we begin, it's important to note Chilean parties are usually grouped together in big coalitions to help consolidate their political power. So I'm not going to fully touch up on every party, but I'll try to at least mention all of them that have a presence in the Chamber of Deputies and/or Senate. So first off, we have the Broad Front Coalition, or Frente Amplio. The Broad Front is one of the 2 coalitions that made up the Approved Dignity Coalition, that ended up with Gabriel Boric as its head, winning the presidential election, with Boric going from student activist to deputy to president, and getting the second largest block in the Chamber of Deputies in the 2021 election. However, the Approved Dignity Coalition seems to be dissolved, so I'll break it up into its 2 major coalitions. The larger of these coalitions is the Broad Front, which was formed as a merger of several different progressive parties in 2017, with its name meant to reference the Uruguayan party of the same name. It currently consists of mainly 3 different parties. First, there is the Social Convergence, the party of Boric, and represents a kind of libertarian/feminist/democratic socialist ideal. It's broadly leftist, but also reformist. Then there's the Democratic Revolution, which was formed from student protests in 2011, although it's now moved into a movement still supported largely by students, but also representing those they want a more leftist, kind of localized, and democratic Chile. Finally, there is the smaller Humanist Party, which was a merger of 2 small leftist parties in 2019, and seems to be a sort of academic left-leaning party. The Approved Dignity Coalition in 2021 got the most support in the greater Santiago area, and in the near north, with more support from young people, particularly among women, students, and queer people. The parties overall represent young progressive forces wanting change in the country. It currently has 20 deputies and 1 senator. Boric is the leader of the group. The front is leftist economically and socially. Boric campaigned on nationalizing the healthcare sector and pensions, raising the minimum wage, reducing the work week, tackling corruption, and reforming the police forces. The front's ideological tradition is very much based on student and activist demands, so they include stuff like opposing further privatization, supporting more indigenous rights, is pro-choice, pro-LGBTQ, opposing the patriarchy, supports more environmental regulations, and trying to remove the remaining influences of the Pinochet dictatorship from Chile. Boric, after the failure of the 2021 Constitutional Convention, has moderated, encouraging more cooperation across the political divides and reaffirming the right of the police to defend themselves when threatened. Boric also has in foreign policy been more critical towards certain leftist states in Latin America, like Venezuela and Cuba, while also being friendly with Colombia and Brazil's new left-leaning presidents, and is pro-Palestinian. A big problem facing the front is that while they managed to get Boric elected into the presidency, their electoral success elsewhere was greatly diminished. They, even when you include the other coalition within the Approved Dignity Coalition and their center-left allies in both the Chamber of Deputies and Senate, failed to get a legislative majority, making it difficult for them to carry out their agenda. The Progressive Constitution getting shot down in 2022 also has really set the tone of the Boric government, with a lot of Chileans rejecting him. It seems a big problem with Boric is no one really likes him. Unsurprisingly, the right don't like him, not liking his ties with the Communist Party, feeling like he was too much of a whiny activist with limited experience actually governing the country, him previously having a shirt that showed the death of conservative politician Jaime Guzman, and seeing him as just too left-wing and out of step with what a lot of Chileans want. However, leftists also don't seem to really like him either. They have criticized the fact that he in more recent months has started to moderate more, seeing him as an opportunist, him continuing previous Chilean administration's policies towards violence in the Araucana, and some feel like the fact he didn't push very hard in implementing the Progressive Constitution was one of the reasons for its defeat. Accusations of corruption against the Boric government, a worsening economy, and rising crime have all led Boric, the Broad Front, and maybe even the left as a whole, to become more and more unpopular. A bit of a strange parallel, but Boric in some ways reminds me of ex-PM Peter Pellegrini from Slovakia, just in the sense both Boric and Pellegrini came to power somewhat surprisingly off the backs of protests against the then administration and violence from the state, but once in power struggled to really govern, with people saying they were a better opposition politician or junior minister than the head of a country. Also, fun fact, Boric in May went to his hometown, went down a slide, and then got stuck. The other half of the Approved Dignity Coalition is the Worthy Chile Coalition, or Chile Digno. Worthy Chile is largely made up of 4 parties. The largest by far is the Communist Party of Chile. The Communists have been active in Chile since the 1910s, and have been a very important party, serving as a voice for Marxism and union rights, despite suffering through state repression at several different points. It played an important role in several different governments, such as the Radical Popular Front in the 30s and 40s, Salvador Allende's Unidad Popular in the 70s, the center-left government from 2013 to 2018, and now Boric's government today. It has historically been very closely tied to unions, and now has a lot of young leaders in the party along with long-time members. The other parties within the coalition are the Humanist Action Party, a party that was formed as a breakoff of another party we will talk about later, promoting humanism and broadly nonviolent leftism, the Social Green Regionalist Federation, a party formed from the merger of several different regional environmentalist parties, and finally the Libertarian Left, a small libertarian leftist movement. The parties are overall like the Broad Front, leftist and progressive, but I suspect the Worthy Chile Coalition, largely due to the dominance of the Communist Party, is a more devoutly Marxist group. The group overall has 16 deputies and 5 senators. The Communists are headed by Barbara Figueroa, the former head of the Workers' United Center of Chile and ambassador to Argentina. Humanist Action is headed by Thomas Hirsch, the former ambassador to New Zealand and current deputy, and the Social Green Regionalist Federation is headed by Flavia Torrealba Diaz, a political scientist. The Worthy Chile Coalition is like the Broad Front in favor of a progressive social policy, and is in favor of more government control in the economy. I'm guessing since they seem to be more Marxist, they are probably less willing to compromise. The communists are friendly towards states like Cuba and China. This position of being friendly towards one-party communist states has meant a lot of the right view the communists as this undemocratic force that is, depending on the person, either planning on ending democracy in Chile or just hypocrites when they talk about democracy in Chile. They are also hostile towards American involvement in Latin America. While the Approved Dignity Coalition is dead, and there are some differences between the Worthy Chile and Broad Front Coalition, both are close together, serving as left-wing alternatives to the status quo and fighting for progressive change. They both are part of a large coalition known as the Government Alliance, with all the parties in the legislature that support Boric. The largest single party within the Government Alliance is the Socialist Party of Chile, or Partido Socialista de Chile, or PS. PS is like the Communist, a very old and important player in Chilean politics. It was formed in the 30s in the aftermath of a short-lived Socialist Republic of Chile. It came to represent, like the Communist, union rights and left-wing change in Chile, although it was never as devoutly Marxist. It reached its peak under Allende's leadership when they won the 1970 election and entered into government, before being overthrown in a coup in 1973. It re-emerged after the Pinochet dictatorship and played an important, but not necessarily leading role in the centre-left coalition, originally named Concertación, that dominated Chile in the 90s and 2000s. After a center-right government in the early 2010s, it again emerged leading this time the new majority coalition in the 2013 election, before becoming the Progressive Convergence Coalition in 2018, and in 2021 playing a role in the new Social Pact Coalition, before aligning with Boric after the election. A lot of names to throw out at you, but important to note, PS was an important center-left social democratic force after the Pinochet dictatorship, supported by a combination of old-school activists and intellectuals, labor unions, those with familial ties to the former Allende government, parts of the middle class, and broadly those who wanted change in Chile but favored a more pragmatic and moderate approach. It's within the new social pact did best in the Los Rios region and the Atacama. It currently has 13 deputies and 6 senators. It is currently headed by Paulina Vodanovic, a former undersecretary for the army and current senator. PS supports a lot of similar things to parties we just talked about. On its website, it condemns neoliberalism and globalism that benefits the rich, wants to end sexism and ageism, and wanting to bridge income inequality, so it broadly appears to be socially liberal and economically interventionist. From 2006 to 2010, and then from 2014 to 2018, Michelle Bachelet from PS was president of Chile, and while president, she sought to decriminalize abortion, create a sovereign wealth fund, increase corporate and progressive taxes, implementing equal pay between men and women, granted amnesty to undocumented migrants, tried to make education more affordable, and signed the TPP in 2016. PS is a large and powerful party in Chile, but even compared to 6 years ago, it is much weaker. While the protests in 2019 were partially protesting the policies of PS's center-right rivals, the protests were also protesting the status quo in Chile, which PS helped build. PS has moderated a lot from the days of Allende, with it not really representing radical change in Chile anymore. Parts of the party do want to see a return to this more radical tradition, clashing with the more moderate members of the party, leading to a lot of infighting. Bachelet's presidency ended with her being pretty widely disliked due to her government failing to carry out a lot of reforms she promised, corruption scandals involving her children, and a weak economy. This has all led more left-leaning voters, which have historically seen the party as their flagship vehicle, to abandon it, instead choosing to vote for parties in the Approved Dignity Coalition for a new, fresh slate. Boric's government struggling to remain afloat might lead more left-leaning voters to return to the PS, but it still will be a party struggling to find its identity and with the baggage of being a part of the political establishment. PS is in the Chamber of Deputies, a part of an alliance known as Democratic Socialism, which consists of 3 other parties. First, there is the Party of Democracy, or Partido por la Democracia, or PPD. The PPD was formed at the end of the Pinochet dictatorship based around Ricardo Lagos, and tried to serve as a big tent opposition to Pinochet, with people ranging from socialists to conservatives all joining. PPD would serve as a part of the Concertación coalition, and in 1990, Lagos would be elected president, serving in that role until 2006. The PPD, while it is currently supporting the government in the government alliance, does seem to be somewhat distant towards the government. With the elections for the Constitutional Convention in 2023, seeing the party break ranks with the government and working in a centrist coalition. The party seems to be characterized by a somewhat hazy ideology, but generally representing a middle ground between centrist and the PS. It did best last election, a part of the new social pact in the O'Higgins and Aysén regions. It currently has 8 deputies and 4 senators. It is currently headed by Jaime Quintana, a former deputy and current senator. Then there is the Liberal Party of Chile, or Partido Liberal de Chile, or PL. The initial Liberal Party of Chile was formed in the 19th century, but since the 1950s, there hasn't really been a proper liberal party in Chile. PL was formed in 2013 from a party that broke off from the PPD in 2007. It was initially a part of the Broad Front coalition before leaving the coalition in the run-up to the 2021 election, feeling the coalition was too leftist and instead running with the New Social Pact. It, unlike the PPD, did actually work with the government in the Constitutional Convention election, a sign that it might be on friendlier footing with the government. The Liberal Party seems to overall present itself as a party for young, technocratic liberals. On its website, it calls for a free market but still with government regulations, opposes discrimination, and wants more power to local governments. The northern city of Arcia seems to be a stronghold for the party. It currently has 5 deputies. It is currently headed by Juan Carlos Urzula. Finally, the last party in the Democratic Socialism Coalition is the Radical Party of Chile, or Partido Radical de Chile, or PR. The Radical Party was historically a very important party in Chile, being founded in the 1860s, serving as a liberal party advocating for a welfare state and strong government supported by the new urban middle class. The Radical Party would dominate the presidency from 1938 to 1952, bringing about the radical era in Chilean history. Due to failures and controversies during this period, the Radical Party lost its dominant position, but played an important role supporting Allende's government. It was outlawed during the Pinochet dictatorship and re-emerged after the dictatorship, this time under the name the Radical Social Democratic Party until 2018 when it brought back its old name. The Radical Party was, funnily enough, always represented a sort of centrist, slow reform, so not really radical. It was a part of the Concertación, and then the New Social Pact, then Democratic Socialism, but like the PPD, broke ranks with the government in the Constitutional Convention elections in 2023. I'm guessing it ideologically is similar to both the Liberal Party and the PPD. In a sense, it seems to somewhat lean left, but is also very moderate. It did best last election in the far south and center of the country, somewhat outside urban areas. It currently has 3 deputies. It is headed by Leonardo Cubillos Ramirez, a lawyer. The last pro-government party is the Green Ecologist Party, or Partido Ecologista Verde, or PEV. PEV is an environmentalist party formed in 2008. It, like a lot of green parties throughout the world, wants more environmental protections, is socially progressive, and is on the left. It was a part of the Broad Front in the 2010s, but broke ranks in 2019, contesting the parliamentary elections in 2021 on its own. While it isn't a part of the government alliance, and there is tension between the party and the ruling coalition, the party's one deputy, Felix González Garcia, is a part of the Broad Front caucus and likely aligns with the government on many policies. It is in a strange position of being dissolved by the Chilean state for failing to get 5% of the vote, and is in the process of trying to re-legalize itself. I'm guessing it will either likely eventually disappear due to complications with its status, or be forced to link up with the Broad Front to survive and remain relevant. It did best last election in the Biobío region, the area south of it, along with urban areas like Concepcion. It is currently headed by Catherine Crillos González. So now we go to the opposition parties. Before we go to the main opposition, I want to finish off the ex-Concertación coalition and talk about the Christian Democratic Party, or Partido Democracia Cristiano, or PDC. The PDC was formed in the 50s from several different progressive Catholic organizations and groups, representing those that want a communal and Catholic alternative to Marxist and fascist forces in the country. It managed to get Eduard Frei Montalva elected in 1964 with the help of the Conservatives, the last of Chile's liberals, and the CIA. It was opposed to Allende's government. It was repressed under the Pinochet dictatorship. It emerged after the dictatorship as a leading force in the Concertación, with it holding the presidency from 1990 to 2000. And helping prop up Lagos' and Bachelet's presidencies in the 2000s and 2010s. Tensions started to emerge in Concertación in the 2010s, with the party threatening to break apart from PS and its center-left allies. It did work with the New Social Pact in 2021, with the PDC candidate leading that coalition, but afterwards remained opposed to Boric's government, and worked with the PPD and PR in the 2023 Constitutional Convention elections. It today represents a moderate Christian democratic ideal, being perhaps the largest centrist party in the country, although with the current direction of the party, it's not 100% sure if that will hold. It got the most support in the Aysén region last election. It currently has 5 deputies and 3 senators. It is currently headed by Alberto Undurraga, the former Minister of Public Works and current deputy. The PDC is, unlike other Christian Democrats throughout the world, not really a center-right party. The best comparison might be to say it's like a Catholic, more friendly with the center-left EVP from Switzerland, leaning somewhat towards social conservatism, while also wanting more economic regulations, which it historically carried out when the party controlled the presidency from 1990 till 2000. It has, in the latest constitutional elections and referendums, had tended to back progressive change to the Chilean constitution. I think the party is taking a more left-wing turn, but it certainly isn't becoming a Marxist or leftist party. While the Chilean Christian Democrats do have a different ideological profile than their European cousins, the PDC is like European Christian Democrats, suffering with appearing outdated and a part of the political establishment. As Chile is becoming less Catholic and more secular, people are less inclined to vote for the PDC. Even though they aren't advocating for a theological Chile, they are seen as from a different time and representing really just the religious. It also doesn't help that they were a major player in the Concertación, so they, like the PS, are seen as largely responsible for the status quo in Chile. They breaking from the rest of Concertación, but still backing the constitutional reforms, has led the party to really struggle and put itself in an awkward position. The left wing of the party see it as abandoning its traditional allies and losing a lot of its influence. Meanwhile, the right wing of the party seeing it as abandoning its more moderate tradition, and as you'll see in a second, a decent number of right-leaning PDC politicians have broken off. The PDC has also been accused of corruption, with its presidential candidate in 2021 being impeached in 2008 due to her relations to a corruption scandal known as the subsidies case. And also the fact that the PDC was backed by the CIA in the 1964 election might mean it's viewed as a tool or puppet for America. The PDC is still an important player in Chile, but it has been severely weakened, and I'm not sure how powerful the party will be in 10 or even 5 years from now. So I mentioned the right-wing breakoffs of the PDC, and there are two big ones. First, there is the Democrats, or Demócratas. The Democrats were formed in late 2022 as a breakoff of the PDC, after the PDC announced they were endorsing a vote for the Progressive Constitution in the 2022 referendum, and that referendum failed. It describes itself as a centrist political movement and is seen as a rejection of those in the center or center-left who called for reform of the state and embraces the legacy of Concertación. It has a statement of principles where there's a lot of general statements saying it favors decentralization, believes in unions, and wants freedom, democracy, social justice, and rule of law. It, in the 2023 referendum, backed the right-wing constitution, which ultimately failed. It currently has 4 deputies and 3 senators. It is currently headed by Jimena Ricón, a senator and former minister of labor. The other PDC breakoff is Yellows for Chile, or Amarillos por Chile. Amarillos, or yellow, seems to be a slang term meaning that a person is a political traitor or spineless, so the name of the party is meant to be an acknowledgement that it isn't like other center-left forces and is a pragmatic and moderate party. It was formed in 2022 and came to represent a similar centrist Concertación apologist position as the Democrats. It was as a movement formed from Christian Warnken, a journalist who frequently clashed with leftists and progressives, but as a party, it was founded by ex-PDC and ex-PR members. It claims to be a party supported by the youth, with half of its members under 45 and a quarter under 25. It currently has 1 deputy, who is also its party leader, Andrés Joanet. So now we go to the major opposition bloc, and actually largest bloc in the legislature, with the Save Chile Coalition, or Chile Seguro. The Save Chile Coalition has gone through several different name changes similar to the Central-Left Coalition, and quite frankly, I don't want to spend 20 seconds going through all the names, but just know that the coalition has always represented the mainstream conservative bloc in Chile. It right now is made up of 3 parties. Firstly, there is the Independent Democratic Union, or UDI. The UDI was the party of Guzman, who we talked about earlier, and is the most right-wing party in the coalition, embracing a national conservative, anti-communist, somewhat communalist ideology that is described as gremialismo. Then there is the National Renewal Party, or RN, which is a more moderate, pragmatic, and standard center-right conservative party. The president from 2010 to 2014, and then from 2018 to 2022, Sebastian Pineda, was formerly a member of the party. Finally, the last party is the Evopoli Party, which represents center-right liberals and quasi-libertarian types, and is seen as a much younger party than the other two. In the 2021 election, the coalition did best in the center of the country and in some rich urban areas. It also generally gets support from military families, those in the middle class, Protestants, and socially conservative Catholics. The coalition ultimately represents pragmatic conservatives and mainstream right-leaning forces in the country. It currently has 49 deputies and 23 senators. The UDI is headed by Javier Macaya, a senator and former deputy. RN is headed by Rodrigo Galilea, another senator and former head of the Maule region. Finally, Evopoli is headed by Gloria Hutt, a former member of the recent Constitutional Convention and Minister of Transport. The coalition is socially conservative and favors free market economics, although it somewhat varies among the parties. Economically, both the UDI and RN say they favor a social market economy, but they fall in line with a lot of center-right economics, generally favoring privatization, are hostile towards an expanded welfare state, wants to protect private property, and RN says it wants to promote quote, equity and tax burdens. Socially, they are hostile towards abortion, back law and order policies, and favors a strong military. However, Evopoli is a bit more socially liberal, backing a more laissez-faire approach to social policies. The coalition is broadly in favor of closer relations with the US and wants to preserve Chile's claims in Antarctica and the Pacific. The Save Chile coalition is in many ways suffering with many of the same problems as the parties that formerly made up Concertación. While not in power as long as parties like PS or the PDC, it still held power for a decent chunk of the 2010s, so they are very much a part of the political establishment, and the 2019 protests took place during their rule. Protesters were not only protesting the status quo, but also the current government, which they felt only cared about the rich, was corrupt, supported an aggressive and violent crackdown of the protests by police, and was backed by Pinochet apologists. Guzman was actually fairly close to Pinochet, helping write the Pinochet-era constitution. The UDI on its website actually says it's good that the military overthrew Allende, and someone implies that the Communist Party, and maybe any other Marxist party, should be banned as Marxism is to them a totalitarian ideology. So the coalition is seen at least partially filled with dictator apologists, and even though it's the respectable conservative force, it's still viewed by those on the left and even somewhat the center as a very reactionary and backwards force. There also has been infighting in the coalition between its various elements, and unless the coalition can turn it around and return to a more successful position, it will likely continue to lose power. Because of this and the coalition somewhat softening its tone after the protest, a decent chunk of conservative voters have abandoned it. Many of these conservatives have found a home in the Republican Party of Chile, or Partido Republicano. The Republican Party was created in 2019 by an ex-UDI deputy, Jose Antonio Cast. Cast rose to prominence during the 2019 protest, styling himself as a principled conservative opponent of the protest. The 2021 election saw Cast get the most votes in the first round, and was actually seen by a decent number of commentators as the likely winner of the second round. However, Cast ended up losing, although the Republican Party continues to be a powerful force in the country, opposing the government. In the 2023 election to elect members of the Constitutional Convention, they were the most voted for party, getting over 1/3 of the vote. The Republican Party in the 2021 election got the most support in the far north, the near south, and in the richer suburbs of Santiago. Its appeal is similar to the appeal of many other hard right to far right parties, being supported by those who want a right-wing party that won't compromise on anything, and is also seen as just anyone that opposes the political establishment. The party currently has 13 deputies and 2 senators. The party's president is Arturo Escuela Ovalle, a former deputy, although Cast seems to be the de facto head of the party. The Republicans are socially conservative and economically right. It opposes increased immigration, with Cast previously calling for a ditch to be built along the border with Bolivia, supports law and order policies, is in favor of school choice, is pro-life, opposes gay marriage, is hostile towards contraceptives, and is seen as being skeptical towards climate change. Economically, it favors less taxes and reducing the state, supporting the free market and protecting private property, opposing nationalization. It is generally supportive of the current Pinochet-era constitution, and Cast and the party have defended the legacy of Pinochet, with Cast bragging that the dictator would have voted for him when he ran in 2017. The Republicans, being the furthest right party, are widely disliked by the left in the country. Cast and the Republicans are viewed as dictator apologists who defended the crimes of his regime. It also doesn't help that Cast's father was a member of the Nazi Party in Germany before he immigrated to Chile, and Cast's brother worked with Pinochet. Cast's more socially conservative stances has also led many progressive and open Chileans to reject him, viewing him as hateful. All this, along with Cast being accused of corruption, led to Boric's victory in 2021, since Cast was viewed as the more extreme politician and someone who might destroy Chilean democracy. The party has made sizable inroads in the right, with its success in the 2023 Constitutional Convention election, but it suffered being rejected in the referendum later that year, which led to infighting, accusations by the center-right that the party was at fault for being too extreme in its proposals, and party members abandoning the party. It is the largest single right-wing party, but it doesn't really control the right in Chile. The Republicans went into the 2021 election as a part of the Christian Social Front. The other party in the front was the Christian Conservative Party, although due to being dissolved for being too small, it has now been reformed as the Christian Social Party, or PSC. The PSC is a right-wing Christian party, seen as representing primarily evangelicals, and largely focusing on opposing stuff like LGBTQ rights, abortion, and sex education in schools. It has seen a bit of growth as some politicians from other right-leaning parties that have been struggling have jumped ship and joined it, although the PSC is still a fairly small party in Chile. The Christian Social Front right now is dissolved, but I don't think it's impossible for the Republicans and the PSC to work together at some point in the future, seeing as both are socially conservative. The PSC currently has 3 deputies. It is currently headed by Sarah Concha, a deputy. The next party is the People's Party, or Partido de la Gente, or PDG. The PDG was formed in 2019 from Franco Parisi. Parisi is an eccentric figure, an economist who ran for president in 2013, winning 10% of the vote. Parisi formed the party trying to present himself as a centrist outsider with the support of the middle class. The PDG opposes immigration, opposes new taxes, supports decentralization, and wants more direct democracy. Parisi was able to get 13% of the vote in the 2021 election, which was notable because Parisi wasn't actually in the country the entire campaign, instead in America, allegedly avoiding paying his wife's alimony. Parisi also claimed he was a professor at the University of Alabama when he was running for office, as he hadn't been associated with the university since a sexual assault claim was filed against him. The PDG managed to get 6 deputies elected, but division in the party, with half of the party ending up voting for a government candidate in an election for the president of the Chamber of Deputies, led a part of the party to break off and form the Let's Move Forward Chile party. The PDG is still active, but its populist and right-leaning anti-establishment messaging has been taken up by the Republican Party, so the PDG has lost support. It might not fully disappear, but it's unlikely to get as much support as they got in 2021. It currently has 3 deputies. Finally, the last party is the Humanist Party, or Partido Humanista, or PH. PH is a humanist party formed in the 80s representing a sort of left-wing, non-violent, kind of hippie-ish movement. It was briefly a part of the Concertación coalition in the 80s before breaking off in the 90s. It worked with other left-wing movements over the years, including the Communists, and was a part of the Broad Front before it broke away, which led to the Humanist Action Party in the Worthy Chile coalition to form. It contested the 2021 election in a coalition known as Dignity Now, working with another small leftist party, getting 3% of the vote and 3 deputies elected, with a lot of its support coming from Eastern Santiago, actually being the most voted for party in that region. However, it was dissolved due to it being too small and is now trying to get re-registered. The parties had to deal with a lot of infighting, as its one remaining deputy, Pamela Giles, is apparently a fairly controversial or polarizing figure, both in and outside the party, for breaking with a lot of humanist tradition, and having a very populist style of campaigning. Also, she did the Naruto run in the legislature in 2020. The party is currently headed by Claudio Ojeda Murillo. So those are the parties of Chile. There's a lot of small breakoffs and parties on their last legs, but it's best to break it down like this. There is the Broad Front and Worthy Chile coalitions, who represent leftists and quasi-anti-establishment progressives. They are aided by a coalition known as Democratic Socialism, a centrist/center-left group that notably contains the Socialist Party, an important social democratic force in the country. The opposition consists then of the Save Chile coalition, a conservative establishment right-wing coalition, the Republican Party, an ultra-conservative party, the Christian Democratic Party, a centrist force that has historically worked with the center-left but has broken off in recent years, and finally several other small different parties. Chilean parties are in flux as the constitutional order is changing. Maybe. There's a sort of hazy cloud around a lot of the parties and the political structure of Chile and just the future of it all. So it's really unclear what their future will be, if they will even be active, or how viable they will be in the next couple of years. But most likely, those kind of 4 main blocks of the progressive left, the moderate left, the establishment right, and then the far right will probably all still exist in the next couple of years. So, thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. Thanks to my patrons. Shout out to Danny Brown for the $10 a month. I really appreciate it. And up next, I will do Slovenian political parties, and then the history of the Republic of the Congo, and then Kazakh political parties. Production is probably going to slow down a little bit just because I'm going to be moving in the next couple of weeks, so excited for that, but it will probably make it difficult to record the podcast and work on it. But yeah, hopefully Slovenian political parties will be out relatively soon. So, thanks for listening, thanks for watching. If you want, you can email me at whydocountriesexist@gmail.com for your thoughts, comments, suggestions, or hate mail. Take care. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.